The shot rang out across the dusty street of Redemption Springs, silencing the usual afternoon chatter as Penelope Frost stood unwavering, smoking pistol still raised. The year was 1876, and she had just put a bullet through the hat of the town drunk who'd been following her for 3 blocks with increasingly vulgar propositions. The crowd parted as she holstered her weapon, her emerald eyes scanning the shocked faces of onlookers. "Next time, I won't aim for the hat," she announced coolly, adjusting her leather gloves before continuing toward the general store. Redemption Springs had never seen a woman quite like Penelope. She'd arrived 6 months ago with nothing but a wagon, a rifle, and determination burning in her eyes. She'd purchased a small, neglected homestead just outside town and set about making it profitable through sheer force of will. The townsfolk whispered about her past, but no one dared ask directly. Some said she was a widow, others claimed she'd fled scandal back east. All agreed on one thing: Penelope Frost was not a woman to be trifled with. As she stepped into Wilkins' general store, the bell above the door announced her arrival. The shopkeeper, a kindly older man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted her warmly. "Afternoon, Miss Frost." "Heard that commotion outside. Everything all right?" "Just teaching manners to those lacking them, Mr. Wilkins," she replied, placing her list on the counter. "I'll need these supplies by Thursday if possible. I'm expanding the chicken coop." Mr. Wilkins nodded, scanning the list. "Should have most of this. Might need to order the wire mesh, though." He paused, lowering his voice. "Also, might want to warn you, there's a new fellow in town, hard type, hired by the Cattlemen's Association to deal with problems." Penelope's expression remained neutral, though her spine stiffened slightly. The Cattlemen's Association had been pressuring smaller homesteaders to sell for months. Her land sat adjacent to a crucial water source they coveted. "I appreciate the warning," she said simply, paying for what items were available and arranging delivery for the rest. As she exited the store, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the main street. She didn't immediately notice the tall figure leaning against the hitching post until he straightened, blocking her path. Her hand instinctively moved toward her holster. "That was quite a display earlier," came a deep voice, smooth as aged whiskey but sharp with an edge of danger. Penelope took his measure quickly. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath a well-worn Stetson, his clothes were trail-dusty but of good quality. The gun at his hip wasn't for show, it sat comfortably, like an extension of his arm. Most telling were his eyes, pale blue, intelligent, and watching her with an intensity that sent an unbidden shiver down her spine. "It was a necessary lesson," she replied coolly. "And you are Samuel Pierce," he answered, touching the brim of his hat. "New to these parts." "The Cattlemen's Association's latest enforcer," she stated rather than asked. A slight smile curved his lips. "I prefer problem solver." "I'm not a problem to be solved, Mr. Pierce." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather, tobacco, and open prairie. "That remains to be seen, Miss Frost, Penelope Frost, and I'd advise you to step aside. You own the North Ridge homestead, don't you?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "The one with the spring, I do, and I have no intention of selling." Samuel studied her face, noting the determination in the set of her jaw, the pride in her posture. "Everyone has a price, Miss Frost." "Not everyone," she countered, stepping around him. "Good day, Mr. Pierce." As she walked away, she felt his eyes following her. She wouldn't show it, but a flutter of unease had settled in her stomach. The Cattlemen's Association didn't send men like Samuel Pierce for friendly negotiations. Samuel watched her go, noting the confident swing of her stride, the way she nodded politely to townsfolk while maintaining a careful distance. There was a story there, behind those guarded eyes. He'd been hired to convince the remaining small landowners to sell by any legal means necessary. The association needed to consolidate the water rights before the railroad negotiations next spring. What they hadn't told him was that one of those landowners would be a woman who shot with deadly accuracy and faced down confrontation without flinching. His job had just become considerably more interesting. The next morning found Penelope repairing fence posts along her property line. The early summer sun beat down mercilessly, and she paused to wipe sweat from her brow. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her reach for the rifle propped against the nearest post. Samuel Pierce rode into view, his black stallion kicking up dust along the trail. He reined in a respectful distance away, raising his empty hands slightly to show he meant no harm. "Morning, Miss Frost," he called. "Mind if I water my horse? Been riding since dawn." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "The creek's just yonder. Help yourself." He dismounted gracefully for a man his size and led his horse to the water. The animal drank deeply while Samuel surveyed the land. The homestead wasn't large, perhaps 80 acres, but it was strategically positioned. The natural spring that fed into the creek made it invaluable in this often parched country. "You've done well here," he observed. "Most wouldn't have lasted 6 months." "I'm not most people," she replied, driving another nail into the fence post with more force than necessary. "Clearly." He walked toward her, stopping at a respectable distance. "The association is prepared to offer you 3 times what this land is worth." Penelope laughed, a surprisingly melodic sound that contradicted her hard exterior. "This land is worth what it provides independence. That's not for sale at any price." Samuel removed his hat, running a hand through dark hair damp with sweat. "Independence is a fine thing, Miss Frost, but it can be mighty lonely." Something flashed in her eyes, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. "I prefer my own company to poor alternatives. The railroad's coming through next year," he continued. "When it does, the association will control who gets water rights. Small operations like yours will be squeezed out eventually." She straightened, hammer still in hand. "Is that a threat, Mr. Pierce?" "An observation," he corrected. "I'm not in the business of threatening women." "What business are you in, exactly?" she challenged, taking a step closer. "Besides intimidating people off their rightfully owned land," he met her gaze steadily. "I'm in the business of resolving conflicts before they turn ugly. The association will have this water access one way or another. I'm offering you the most profitable way out. And if I refuse, then things get complicated," he admitted, "legally, financially, potentially otherwise." Her fingers tightened around the hammer. "I've faced complications before. I don't doubt it." Samuel stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to maintain eye contact. "But you haven't faced the Cattlemen's Association. They don't lose, Miss Frost." "First time for everything," she replied, her voice softer but no less determined. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of matching wills. Samuel found himself admiring her courage, foolish though it might be. "I'll be in town for the next month," he said finally. "Think on my offer." "Don't waste your time," she advised. As he returned to his horse, he paused. "Why this place, Miss Frost? There's easier land to be had." Penelope hesitated, then gestured toward a small, fenced plot beneath an oak tree on a nearby rise. A simple wooden cross stood sentinel there. "My husband, James. Pneumonia took him 2 winters ago," she said quietly. "This was his dream. I mean to see it through." Samuel nodded solemnly. "I respect loyalty, Miss Frost, but the living must still make practical choices. Practicality isn't always the highest virtue, Mr. Pierce." He mounted his horse with fluid grace. "Perhaps not. but survival often depends on it. As he rode away, Penelope watched until horse and rider disappeared over the ridge. Something about Samuel Pierce unsettled her in ways the other association men never had. Perhaps it was that he seemed to understand her determination rather than dismiss it. Or perhaps it was those eyes that seemed to see too much. Either way, she'd need to be on her guard. The association was escalating their tactics, and Samuel Pierce didn't strike her as a man who failed in his assignments. Over the next week, Samuel made it his business to learn everything about Penelope Frost. The townsfolk were surprisingly tight-lipped at first, but he had ways of loosening tongues. He learned she'd arrived from Chicago with her ailing husband, who'd lasted barely a year in the harsh territory. Instead of returning east after his death, she'd thrown herself into making the homestead work, learning ranching skills, hunting, and even basic blacksmithing when necessary. She came to town every Thursday for supplies, attended church on Sundays, though sat alone in the back pew, and had politely but firmly refused 3 marriage proposals from local widowers and ranchers. She paid her debts promptly, helped neighbors when illness struck, but maintained a careful distance from everyone. What intrigued Samuel most was what he couldn't discover her life before Redemption Springs. No one seemed to know much about her past, only that she spoke with the refined accent of Eastern education, and occasionally received letters postmarked from Philadelphia. On Thursday, he positioned himself at the saloon across from the general store, nursing a whiskey while waiting for her arrival. When she appeared, driving her wagon with capable hands, he noticed something different. She dressed with slightly more care today, her hair neatly pinned beneath a modest hat, wearing a blue dress that, while practical, complemented her eyes. He watched as she efficiently conducted her business, then headed toward the post office. When she emerged, her expression had changed, a letter clutched tightly in her hand. Whatever news it contained had troubled her deeply. Samuel made his decision then. He downed his whiskey and intercepted her as she returned to her wagon. "Miss Frost," he greeted, tipping his hat. "May I buy you lunch at the hotel restaurant?" She looked startled, then suspicious. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's midday. We both need to eat, and I'd like to discuss your situation civilly." "My situation needs no discussion," she replied stiffly. "Then consider it an opportunity to learn your adversary's weaknesses," he suggested with a slight smile. "Isn't that what any sensible strategist would do?" That earned him a reluctant smile in return. "Are you admitting to weaknesses, Mr. Pierce? Everyone has them. The wise acknowledge theirs." She seemed to deliberate, glancing at the letter in her hand before tucking it into her pocket. "Very well. 1 meal. No agreements." The hotel restaurant was the most respectable establishment in town, with actual tablecloths and a menu that aspired beyond beans and beef. Several patrons looked up in surprise as Samuel escorted Penelope to a table, pulling out her chair with practiced courtesy. After they ordered, an awkward silence fell. Samuel broke it first. "Trouble from home?" he asked, gesturing toward her pocket where the letter rested. Her eyes widened slightly. "You're observant. It's necessary in my line of work." She took a sip of water. "And what exactly is your line of work when you're not pressuring homesteaders?" "I solve problems," he repeated his earlier description. "Sometimes that means tracking rustlers, sometimes mediating water disputes, sometimes persuading people to make practical decisions." "How euphemistic," she remarked dryly. "I operate within the law, Miss Frost," he clarified. "I've never strong-armed anyone. Just applied pressure until they broke of their own accord." He conceded the point with a slight nod. "The association believes the territory's future depends on unified management of resources. Small holdings become untenable as development increases. And the profits increase for those already wealthy, she added. Their food arrived roast chicken with potatoes for her, steak for him. She ate with the precise manners of good breeding, confirming his suspicions about her background. "You're not from frontier stock originally," he observed. She paused, fork midway to her mouth. "Neither are you. That accent has Boston underpinnings." He smiled appreciatively. "Harvard, actually. Law. A Harvard lawyer working as a hired gun. How fascinating. And a Philadelphia society lady homesteading alone in frontier territory," he countered. "Equally fascinating." Her eyes narrowed. "You've been asking about me." "As you've likely asked about me," he replied easily. "Knowledge is advantage. Then you should know I won't be moved, regardless of your Harvard education." Samuel leaned forward slightly. "The letter that troubled you, family problems back east," her composure slipped momentarily. "That's not your concern. It could be relevant. Everyone has pressure points, Miss Frost. The association will find yours eventually." "Is that a threat?" Her voice had gone dangerously soft. "A warning," he corrected. "From someone who'd rather see you take the generous offer than face what comes next. Which is legal challenges to your water rights, tax reassessments, difficulty selling your goods or buying supplies. The association has deep pockets and influence." Penelope set down her utensils carefully. "Why do you care how this resolves, Mr. Pierce? Isn't it simply another job to you?" The question caught him off guard. Why did he care? There was something about her determination that resonated with him, reminded him of principles he'd once held before pragmatism and ambition had taken precedence. "I prefer clean resolutions," he said finally. "Less mess for everyone." "How considerate," she replied, her tone indicating she didn't believe him. "But I've endured worse than economic pressure, Mr. Pierce." "I believe you have," he acknowledged, "but everyone has a breaking point." She leaned forward then, eyes flashing with a mix of defiance and something else, something that made his breath catch. "You can't handle me," she teased, though there was steel beneath her words. The cowboy growled, "Try me," low enough that only she could hear, the challenge in his voice unmistakable. For a charged moment, neither spoke, the air between them crackling with tension that wasn't entirely antagonistic. Penelope recovered first, rising from her chair. "Thank you for lunch, Mr. Pierce. It was most educational." "The offer stands," he reminded her, "3 times fair market value." "Some things aren't for sale," she replied. "Good day." As she walked away, Samuel realized he was more intrigued than ever. Penelope Frost was proving to be his most challenging assignment yet, and not entirely for professional reasons. 3 days later, disaster struck. Penelope woke to the smell of smoke. She barely had time to grab her shotgun and a small metal box containing her important papers before flames engulfed the small cabin. By dawn, nothing remained but smoldering ruins. She stood amid the devastation, ash clinging to her nightgown and shawl, face streaked with soot and unshed tears. The livestock had been spared, the fire had been set with precision, destroying her home but leaving the valuable animals and barn untouched. A message, not mindless destruction. "Miss Frost!" The shout came from the road as Samuel galloped up, dismounting before his horse fully stopped. "Are you hurt?" She turned to him, eyes blazing. "This is your doing." "No," he said firmly, approaching her. "This wasn't me, nor the association, at least not with authorization." "Convenient timing," she spat. "I don't operate this way," he insisted, surveying the destruction. "This is criminal, arson. I'll help you find who did this." "Why should I believe you?" "Because if I wanted to pressure you, I'd use legal means," he said bluntly. "This is crude and dangerous. Someone could have been killed." Penelope studied his face, looking for deception and finding what appeared to be genuine outrage. Still, she kept her distance. "Where will you stay?" he asked. "The barn is untouched," she answered stiffly. "That's no place for a woman," she challenged. "I've slept rougher." Samuel removed his coat and held it out to her. "At least take this. That nightgown offers little protection from the morning chill." She hesitated, then accepted it, wrapping the warm garment around her shoulders. It smelled of him leather, tobacco, and something distinctly masculine. "We should report this to the sheriff," he said. "Sheriff Dawson is in the association's pocket," she replied bitterly. "Then we'll gather evidence ourselves," Samuel insisted. "Someone did this and it wasn't authorized. The association wants your land, not a murder charge. Why do you care?" She demanded. "This only helps your cause." "Because this isn't justice," he answered, eyes intense. "And contrary to what you think, I do have principles." As the sun rose higher, they examined the ruins carefully. Samuel's tracking skills proved considerable. He found boot prints leading from the back of the property toward town, and the distinctive pattern of a horse with a chipped front shoe. "That's Mercer's gelding," Penelope realized. "Vernon Mercer, he works for the largest rancher in the association." "Edward Blackwell," Samuel nodded grimly. "The man most interested in your water rights. You think Blackwell ordered this?" "I think Mercer may have taken initiative to impress his boss," Samuel replied. "Either way, we'll confront them both." By mid-morning, neighbors had arrived to help. Samuel noticed how they came despite Penelope's reputation for independence, a testament to the frontier code of mutual aid in times of crisis. With their assistance, they erected a temporary shelter, using salvaged materials and canvas. "You should come to town," Samuel urged as evening approached. "The hotel has rooms." "I won't abandon my property," she said firmly. "That's exactly what they want." "Then I'll stay," he declared, "until we've sorted this out." She stared at him, suspicious. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered simply. "And because I want to know who's undermining my assignment with criminal acts." Penelope considered her limited options: stay alone, vulnerable to another attack, or accept help from the very man sent to remove her from her land. Neither choice was ideal. "One night," she conceded finally. "You can sleep in the barn." That night, after a simple meal cooked over an open fire, they sat in companionable silence watching the stars emerge. Penelope had borrowed clothes from a neighbor woman, a simple dress too large for her frame but more substantial than her soot-stained nightgown. "You never answered my question," Samuel said quietly. "About the letter that troubled you." Penelope sighed, too exhausted for pretense. "My father is ill, heart troubles. My sister writes that he's asking for me." "Will you go to him?" "I can't," she answered, pain evident in her voice. "We parted on terrible terms when I married James. He disowned me, said marrying a frontier dreamer was beneath our family station." She laughed bitterly. "He was right, in a way. James died chasing that dream, leaving me with nothing but this land." "Yet you stayed," Samuel observed. "I had nowhere else to go," she admitted. "And returning defeated seemed worse than struggling here. At least here I answer to no one. Except the elements, illness, bandits, and now arsonists," he pointed out. "Freedom always has a price," she replied. "What about you?" "What price did you pay for your freedom, Harvard lawyer?" Samuel was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "My freedom? I sold it to the highest bidder," he finally said. "After graduating with honors, I had my choice of prestigious firms. I chose the one representing the largest railroad interests, made a fortune helping them acquire land by any means necessary." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I told myself it was progress, manifest destiny, the greater good." until I forced an entire Pawnee settlement off their ancestral land for a rail spur that was never even built, just a tactical move to block a competitor. He shook his head. I couldn't face myself after that, so I came west, thinking I'd make amends somehow. By working for the Cattlemen's Association, she asked skeptically. By using the law properly, he corrected. I ensure their acquisitions are legal, not forced. At least that was the agreement. He gestured toward the ruins of her cabin. This changes everything. Their eyes met across the fire, and for the first time they saw each other clearly, not as adversaries, but as people shaped by difficult choices and circumstances beyond their control. "Get some rest, Miss Frost," Samuel said gently. "Tomorrow we confront Mercer and Blackwell." As promised, the next morning they rode to the Blackwell Ranch, the largest operation in the territory. Edward Blackwell received them in his study, a richly appointed room that seemed transported from an Eastern gentleman's club. "Pierce," he acknowledged coldly. "Miss Frost." "What brings you here unannounced?" "Arson," Samuel stated bluntly. "Miss Frost's cabin was burned to the ground last night. We have evidence Vernon Mercer was involved." Blackwell's expression revealed nothing. A serious accusation. Vernon Mercer had been standing by the door. He stepped forward, hand hovering near his gun. "I don't know what they're talking about, boss. Your horse has a distinctive chip in its front right shoe," Samuel continued. "The same pattern we found leading from Miss Frost's property after the fire." "Lots of horses get chipped shoes," Mercer sneered. "And do lots of men drop personalized belt buckles at arson sites?" Penelope asked, producing a silver buckle with Mercer's initials that they'd found that morning during a second search. Mercer's face paled visibly. "Vernon," Blackwell's voice was dangerously quiet. "Did you set fire to Miss Frost's cabin?" "You said we needed to increase the pressure," Mercer replied defensively. "That Pierce was taking too long with his fancy legal maneuvers." "I said apply pressure, not commit felony arson," Blackwell snapped. He turned to Samuel and Penelope. "I assure you, this was not authorized. The association operates within the law." "Then you'll have no objection to compensating Miss Frost for her losses," Samuel pressed. "And turning Mercer over to the authorities." A calculating look crossed Blackwell's face. "That seems fair. Though of course, rebuilding would be costly and time-consuming. Perhaps Miss Frost would reconsider our offer. We could increase it to 4 times market value, given these unfortunate circumstances." Before Penelope could respond, Samuel interjected. "Actually, Mr. Blackwell, I've been reconsidering my position with the association. Specifically, I'm concerned about possible violations of territorial water rights statutes in your acquisition strategy." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. Meaning I've studied the original land grants thoroughly. The spring on Miss Frost's property was specifically designated as a public water access point in the Territorial Charter of 1853. Any attempt to privatize it is, in fact, illegal under territorial law. Penelope stared at Samuel in surprise. This was news to her. "That's absurd," Blackwell sputtered. "We've acquired a dozen similar properties." "Yes," Samuel agreed pleasantly. "You have. All potentially illegally. I'd hate for the territorial governor to receive documentation suggesting a pattern of illegal water rights appropriation. The political fallout could be significant." The room went silent as Blackwell processed the threat. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Miss Frost retains her property with clear title. The association provides full compensation for the destroyed cabin plus damages. And the association signs an agreement to recognize and respect the public access nature of the spring, while paying Miss Frost a fair annual maintenance fee." "You're blackmailing me," Blackwell accused. "I'm negotiating," Samuel corrected. Blackmail would be threatening to reveal your arrangement with Judge Hollister to falsify land records, which, incidentally, I could also do. Blackwell's face reddened dangerously. You're finished in this territory, Pierce. Perhaps, Samuel agreed amiably. But Miss Frost will remain securely on her land. Do we have an agreement? By sundown, they had returned to Penelope's homestead with a signed agreement and a bank draft that would more than cover rebuilding her cabin. As they dismounted, she turned to Samuel with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Was that true? About the spring being designated public access, a smile tugged at his lips. Completely. I found the original survey maps in the land office last week. I was actually researching how to use that information on behalf of the association, but, he shrugged. Plans change. You sacrificed your position for me, she said wonderingly. Why? Samuel stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool evening air. Because some things are worth more than money or position, he answered softly. Integrity, justice. He paused, his eyes searching hers. Connection. You hardly know me, she whispered. I know enough, he replied. I know you're the most determined, principled woman I've ever met. I know you face each day with courage that humbles me, and I know that helping you keep this land feels more right than anything I've done in years. Penelope's heart raced as he gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. What happens now? She asked. Now, he said thoughtfully, I offer my services to help you rebuild. I have some experience with construction. And after that? After that depends on you, Penelope, he said, using her first name for the first time. I find myself reluctant to leave Redemption Springs. She stepped back slightly, needing distance to think clearly. This is happening very fast. We don't have to decide anything tonight, he assured her. Rebuilding will take time. We can use that time to better understand what's between us. And what is between us exactly? She challenged, though her tone had softened. Something I haven't felt before, he admitted. Something worth exploring. Over the next several weeks, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Samuel brought his belongings from town and set up camp near the barn. Each day they worked side by side rebuilding her cabin, larger and sturdier than before. In the evenings, they talked by the fire, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams, their regrets. Samuel revealed how his ambition had gradually corrupted his youthful idealism, how each compromise had seemed small until he found himself unrecognizable. Penelope shared her privileged upbringing, her rebellion in marrying James despite her family's objections, and the harsh lessons of frontier life that had forged her independent spirit. As summer turned to autumn, the new cabin neared completion. Neighbors helped raise the roof, and Penelope's pride in the homestead was evident in every careful detail. Samuel found himself admiring not just her determination, but her vision. She wasn't merely surviving here. She was building something meaningful. One evening, as they sat on the newly built porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Samuel took her hand gently in his. I received a letter today, he said. From the territorial governor's office. Penelope tensed, fearing bad news. What did it say? They're establishing a commission on water rights, he explained. They've asked me to serve as legal counsel, given my expertise in the matter. Here, in the territory, he nodded. Based in Redemption Springs initially, it seems our confrontation with Blackwell had wider repercussions. Several other landowners have raised similar concerns about water access. Penelope's eyes widened. That's wonderful news, Samuel. It's perfect for you. There's more, he continued. I also wrote to my former colleagues in Boston. It seems your father's condition has stabilized. The doctors believe he may have several good years ahead of him with proper care. Tears sprang to her eyes. How did you? I thought perhaps, with the cabin finished and your position secure, you might consider a journey east, he suggested carefully. Reconciliations are worth attempting in my experience. I couldn't leave the homestead, she protested weakly. Not alone, he agreed. But I've spoken with the Anderson family. Their eldest son is looking for management experience. He'd oversee things in exchange for a share of proceeds. Just for a few months. Penelope stared at him in wonder. You've thought of everything. Not quite everything, Samuel admitted, suddenly looking nervous. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, hand-carved with intricate wildflower designs. There's one more matter to consider. Her breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a simple gold band set with a single pearl. Penelope Frost, he said softly, these past months have shown me what truly matters in life. Not wealth or position, but purpose, integrity, and love. I find all three with you. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? For a moment she couldn't speak, overcome with emotion. Then she laughed a joyous, unrestrained sound that echoed across the homestead. Samuel Pierce, she said, cupping his face in her hands. For a Harvard-educated lawyer, you can be remarkably slow. I've been waiting weeks for you to ask. Is that a yes? He asked, eyes bright with hope. Yes, she whispered against his lips before kissing him with all the passion she'd been holding back. Though I warn you one last time, you can't handle me. Samuel pulled her closer, a low growl of pleasure in his throat. I'm willing to spend a lifetime trying. They were married a month later in Redemption Springs' small church, surrounded by the neighbors who had become friends. After a winter honeymoon that included a reconciliation visit to Penelope's ailing father in Philadelphia, they returned to the homestead in early spring. Over the years that followed, Samuel's work with the Water Commission brought positive change to the territory, protecting the rights of small landowners while ensuring fair access for all. Penelope's homestead flourished under their combined efforts, becoming known for its fine horses and innovative water management techniques. In time, the sound of children's laughter joined the symphony of homestead life, 2 daughters and a son who grew up strong and free in the shadow of the mountains, inheriting their mother's determination and their father's sense of justice. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on that same porch watching another spectacular sunset, Samuel presented Penelope with a journal bound in soft leather. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find his handwriting filling the pages. "Our story," he explained. "From that first day when you shot the hat off poor drunk Miller, to this morning when young James brought home that frog that terrified the kitchen maid." Tears filled her eyes as she leafed through the pages. "You remembered everything." "How could I forget?" he asked, drawing her close. "You were the challenge I wasn't expecting, the complication I couldn't solve with legal maneuvering." "And now?" she asked, eyes twinkling with familiar mischief. "Now," he growled playfully, pulling her onto his lap, "you're still the most magnificent challenge of my life. One I'm grateful to face every day." "You handle me quite well, Mr. Pierce," she teased. "I'm still trying, Mrs. Pierce," he replied, capturing her lips in a kiss that held all the passion of their first and the promise of many more to come. "And I always will."